Every once in a while, a moment hits Raider Nation so hard that it forces everyone to stop and ask, what in the world is happening to this team? Today is one of those moments. What you're about to hear may shock some people, but for anyone who watched that disaster of a game, it's the truth everyone is thinking but nobody wants to say out loud. Before we get into the latest breaking updates, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and don't forget to press the bell icon so you never miss the real story behind Raiders football. Alright, let's get into it. Tuesday is here, and once again, Raider Nation is left shaking its head after another humiliating loss under Pete Carroll. People call it Overreaction Tuesday, but let me be absolutely clear, this isn't an overreaction. Not even close. I'm going to say something that needs to be said: Pete Carroll needs to retire. Not tomorrow. Not next year. Right now. And before anyone calls this emotional or dramatic, understand this isn't coming from a place of hate. It's coming from a place of exhaustion. A place of confusion. A place where fans simply want their team back. Because the truth is simple, this Raiders team is the worst product we've seen since the franchise arrived in Las Vegas. Worse than the McDaniels mess. Worse than the Pierce collapse. Worse than the Gruden downfall. This version, the Pete Carroll version, feels lost, hopeless, and completely directionless. And the Monday Night Football disaster? It wasn't a game. It was a symbol. A symbol of everything broken, from the first snap to the final second. Offense? Broken. Defense? Broken. Special teams? A weekly headache. Leadership? Non-existent. And yet somehow, Carroll continues to push forward like nothing is wrong. Like a 74-year-old captain steering a ship he no longer has control of. Look, nobody denies his legacy. Pete Carroll is a Hall of Famer. He will forever be remembered as one of the great football minds. But there comes a moment, just like when you realize your grandparents shouldn't be behind the wheel anymore, when you have to face reality. That moment is now. And if you want even more proof, let's talk about the offensive game plan, the one Carroll approved himself. Geno Smith throwing it 42 times, while the running backs touched the ball 6 times. 6. At halftime, the plan was literally to throw it 27 times and run it 3. That's not strategy. That's panic disguised as confidence. Even Geno said he plays better with his back against the wall, and somehow, that became the entire identity of the offense. No balance. No identity. No leadership. This, right here, is the heart of the problem. Stay with me. More to come. Geno Smith spent the entire week talking about cutting it loose, and somehow that became the guiding philosophy of the entire offense. It felt as if Pete Carroll simply nodded along to whatever Geno wanted. Not because it was smart. Not because it served the team. But because Carroll seemed more invested in proving himself right than doing what was actually right for the Raiders. And the wildest part? He openly admitted he helped build that offensive game plan, a game plan that looked chaotic, confused, and completely disconnected from reality. Everyone knew the offense would struggle, but what they rolled out was something beyond struggle. It was a blueprint of dysfunction from top to bottom. And speaking of dysfunction, let's talk about Caleb Rogers. There's a story circulating, one I'm still digging into, about Rogers telling people he expected to start. And apparently, that confidence didn't sit well with certain coaches. Maybe that's why he was made inactive. Maybe not. But what we know for sure is this: a young player with real potential was sidelined at a time when this team desperately needs fresh energy. Whether he was ready or not doesn't even matter anymore. At 2-8, you should want your rookies to get real reps. Instead, the staff chose to humble him, if the story is true, only to roll out the exact same struggling offensive line for 4 quarters. And that line? It was one of the worst performances we've seen all season, which is saying a lot. Meanwhile, Will Putnam was overwhelmed at center. They could have kept Jordan Meredith right where he'd been performing and let Rogers learn under the spotlight of Monday Night Football. But no, they benched him, and the result was predictable failure. Fans are begging for change. People are typing, please, like a prayer, hoping the next notification on their phone is the one that finally ends this nightmare. Please, step down. Please, give this team a chance to reset. Please, let the Raiders breathe again. And then there's the offensive line shuffle. The coaches spent days insisting the right guard spot would belong to Putnam, Kappa, or Rogers. Then, without hesitation, they completely reversed course, sliding Meredith to guard and Putnam back to center like it was nothing. Quick decisions aren't the problem. Blind decisions are. And this staff keeps making them. The frustration builds every single week, and this latest decision-making circus only adds to it. Earlier in the season, when the idea of moving JPJ to center came up, Pete Carroll shut it down instantly, almost like the suggestion was outrageous. He insisted the staff had spent the entire offseason preparing the line a certain way, and changing it was impossible. But suddenly, this week, shifting Jordan Meredith to guard and throwing Putnam at center was no problem at all. So let me get this straight, moving one player is impossible, but flipping the entire structure of the line overnight is perfectly fine. It's the inconsistency that's maddening. It's the favoritism that's obvious. And it's the stubbornness that's destroying this team. Every week, Carroll reveals whose opinions matter to him and whose don't. Maybe it's his son influencing decisions, maybe it's pure ego, no one knows. But what's clear is simple. The decisions aren't being made with the team in mind. They're being made to protect certain players and punish others. And that brings me to Kai Blue Kelly. The staff put him on the field for 3 full quarters. 3. And the results were brutal: 6 targets. 6 catches allowed. 87 yards. 2 touchdowns. All given up by one player. Meanwhile, Darian Porter, who has consistently outplayed him whenever he's been on the field, just stood there waiting. When Porter finally entered the game, it was already too late. The damage was done. And every fan watching knew exactly what was coming long before the coaches did. How is this happening in Week 11? How are we still rewarding struggling veterans while rookies are benched until their confidence is gone? And how does Pete Carroll stand at the podium after the game and say, "They're not showing me enough"? Not showing what? Because Kai Blue Kelly has shown plenty, none of it good. This is the same coach who makes excuse after excuse, week after week. The same coach who forces rookies to prove themselves, yet gives endless chances to veterans who haven't earned a single snap. The same coach who seems to be guiding this team without a map, a compass, or even a clue. Right now, up feels like down. Wrong feels like right. And you get the sense that if you told this coaching staff California was west, they'd argue it's east just because it fits their narrative. It's a mess, a deep, exhausting, infuriating mess. But trust me, there are still more reasons Pete Carroll needs to step down, and we're about to get into them. Watching this season unfold, one thing has become painfully clear: this coaching staff keeps making decisions that weaken the team rather than build it. And nothing highlights that more than the way they've handled Ashton Jeanty. You could see the frustration in him after the game, not subtle, not hidden, real, raw frustration. A top 6 pick, a player with explosive talent, standing there saying, "I don't call the plays." That tells you everything. The body language, the tone, the disappointment. How can anyone blame him? You draft a star running back, then surround him with an offensive line that can't open a lane, can't protect, and can't even provide consistency. It's negligence disguised as a strategy. And it's just another reason on a very long list of why this coaching regime has lost the plot. Now let's shift to the defensive side of the ball, if we can even call it a defense at this point. Every week it's the same nightmare: receivers running wide open, blown coverages, miscommunication, and missed assignments. And yet the team keeps trotting out players in roles they don't belong in. Lonnie Johnson Jr. Great athlete, but he's a strong safety, not a free safety. Isaiah Pola-Mao. Another strong safety forced into a role he doesn't fit. Kai Blue Kelly getting reps he absolutely hasn't earned. Devin White being asked to cover in situations he has never been good at. It's like the defense is being built backwards, upside down, and blindfolded. And here's the craziest part: defensive discipline is supposed to be Pete Carroll's specialty, his identity, his foundation, his bread and butter. But whatever he's serving now, it's stale. It's moldy. And it's time to throw it out. The numbers speak for themselves. No pressure. No reliable coverage. No adjustment when opponents expose the same weaknesses week after week. You can practically see quarterbacks relax the moment they drop back, knowing someone will be wide open in about 2 seconds. Even Cowboys offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer, after his team dismantled this defense, said he held back late in the game out of respect for Carroll. And while that's a polite gesture, it's also embarrassing. Respect is fine. But Raiders fans want a head coach who earns respect here, who builds his legacy here, not someone living off past accomplishments while the team becomes a punchline. And maybe the biggest issue of all. You're 2-8, and you still refuse to play the young guys. How can a team this bad continue trotting out the same struggling veterans while the rookies sit and rot on the sideline? How can you preach development, but refuse to let your future see the field? It's a complete failure of direction, a team wandering through a season with no plan, no identity, and no willingness to change. You can't keep telling the world, the young guys just aren't ready, when you never give them the chance to prove it. That's how you lose a locker room. And after watching that game, man, it feels like that moment has already begun. I'm not going to pretend I know who's packing up their office tomorrow morning. I'm going to reach out to people, sure, but let's be honest, after a collapse like that, nobody's replying to anything. What I do know is this: Pete Carroll and his staff are running out of the team's trust. And I'm not basing that on rumors. I'm basing it on what players have said in the past, and the energy we just watched on that field. Body language doesn't lie. Post-game reactions don't lie. These guys look exhausted from watching the same decisions get repeated again and again. You can't hand-pick favorites and expect the locker room to stay united. Now here's the tough part, the reason I'm ready for Pete to walk away. If he goes, the whole tree goes with him. That means Chip Kelly is gone. That means Patrick Graham is gone. And honestly, I've hit the point where I'm willing to accept that. I've respected Patrick Graham for a long time, but I can't pretend this structure is working anymore. Because right now, being a Raiders fan feels backwards. My best days are the ones when the Raiders don't play. My worst days are the ones when I sit down and force myself to watch another week of this disaster. And that's not how football is supposed to feel. If Pete steps down, Chip Kelly follows him out the door. And when Chip goes, so does Geno Smith. And I'm ready for that. I'm done pretending this experiment is one piece away from working. The Raiders reflect the personality of their leaders, and right now, those leaders are Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly, and Geno Smith. Stubborn. Excuse-driven. Stuck in their ways. That's the identity of this team in 2025, whether we want to admit it or not. So if you're telling me there's a path where I don't have to watch this trio anymore, sign me up yesterday. Because as long as those three run the show, this team isn't going anywhere. And let's be real, if Pete tries to save his job, he'll need a scapegoat. And there's only one option left, Chip Kelly. Something has to give. Either Pete steps aside, Geno stops starting, or Chip Kelly gets fired. But if Geno is still under center, if Chip is still calling plays, if Pete keeps protecting them, then this fanbase is going to check out harder than I've ever seen. And honestly, they already have one foot out the door. There's one thing that's been almost impossible to ignore lately: the people who show up, no matter how ugly the season gets. And if there's someone who deserved a real shout-out after this week, it's the Weldonator. The energy, the support, the passion, it's been unreal. The conversations we've had, the way he shows up through the highs and the lows, that kind of dedication reminds me why this fanbase is different. I've talked about him so much that even my friends and family know his name at this point. If my dad met him today, I swear he'd wrap him in a bear hug big enough to break ribs. That's the kind of connection this community builds. And honestly, people like him, like Lord Cameron Abbott, like every single person who shows up again and again, that's what keeps this thing alive. Raider Nation is the heartbeat of this franchise. It's the reason many of us are still here, even when the football breaks us week after week. Now let me get to what might be the most important point of all. The reason I want Pete Carroll to walk away, not out of anger, but because I no longer believe this regime can guide the future of this team. Ask yourself this: does anyone truly trust Pete Carroll to make the right call for the years ahead? To draft the right players? To sign the right players? To build something real? I hear people saying, let's tank for Mendoza. Let's tank for the next big quarterback. Tank all you want, but do you honestly believe Pete would pull the trigger on a quarterback? Because everything we've watched this season tells me he wouldn't. His loyalty to Geno Smith runs so deep that even if the number 1 pick was staring him in the face, I don't think he'd do it. And even if he did draft a quarterback, is this the environment you want that kid stepping into? The stubbornness, the excuses, the refusal to move off their guys, it's exhausting. This staff clings to loyalty even when it drags the entire roster backward. And the Raiders have lived in that cycle for far too long. I'm tired of the same story: stubborn leadership, predictable decisions, and a franchise stuck in the mud. The sooner this team moves on from Pete, the sooner the organization can breathe again. The sooner Pete steps away, the faster the Chip Kelly, Geno Smith chapter ends. And for the first time in years, we could actually start building something new instead of reliving the same nightmare every Sunday. I mean this genuinely. I want the Raiders to be done with Pete Carroll. And I want Pete Carroll to be done with the Raiders. Both sides need a clean break to move forward. Because right now, I don't see a path back to relevance with this trio running the show. We're too far off course. Way too far. So let me say this as respectfully as I can. Pete Carroll, it's time. Please step down.